Deshaun thought he had handled everything perfectly. He had the witnesses, he had the performance. He had a whole speech planned for when the investigators came asking questions. The only thing he forgot to account for was me. And by the time he remembered I existed, I was already sitting across from a federal agent, rolling a suitcase full of his crimes onto a government conference table.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. Greater Restoration Baptist sits at the corner of Cascade and Beecher in southwest Atlanta, and if you have never been inside, you would not understand what it means to have that church behind you. 340 members, 4 deacons, a pastor who has buried half the neighborhood's grandparents and married most of their grandchildren. My mother has attended since before I was born. Her name is on a pew cushion. That is not a figure of speech. There is a small brass plate on the end of the 4th pew from the front on the right side that says Estelle Greer, faithful member, which my mother paid for herself and considers one of her finest accomplishments. I tell you all of that because you need to understand what kind of room we were standing in on the morning of our 7th anniversary. Darius had organized the whole thing. That should have been the first thing I noticed. Darius organizing a church program for us was not something that naturally happened. He attended on major Sundays, sat with me, shook hands with the right people. But planning a celebration between the morning services, complete with a printed program insert and a catered reception in the fellowship hall, that was not his idea of a good time. He said he wanted to honor the marriage in front of the people who mattered most to us. I thought it was sweet. I helped with the flowers. The room was full. My mother sat in the 4th pew with her sister Wanda and 3 women from her prayer group, all of them in their Sunday best, all of them glowing because Estelle Greer's daughter had married a good man and built something solid, and here was the proof of it, standing right up front. Darius's mother was there, his brother, several couples from the congregation who had mentored us in our early years, and people Darius had brought in himself, business associates, a city councilman he worked with on a development project, a man I did not recognize who sat in the back and left early. The associate pastor said a few words. 2 of the older married couples in the church gave brief testimonials about the work of staying committed. Then Darius stood up. He had on a dark gray suit I liked. He looked calm, handsome. He was always handsome in a way that read as trustworthy, which I understand now is a skill some people develop on purpose. He took the microphone and he smiled at the room and he said our names, and everyone settled in, ready to feel something warm. What happened next took about 4 minutes. I have thought about those 4 minutes so many times that I could probably recite them from memory. But what I remember most is not the specific words. It is the moment I realized the words were not for me. He talked about the weight of the marriage. He talked about carrying things alone. He used the word transparency more than once. He looked at me twice, briefly, with an expression I can only describe as careful, like a man who has rehearsed where to look and for how long. He never said I was unstable. He never said I had done anything wrong. He was too precise for that. What he said was that he had not been fully known in this marriage, that there were things about our life together that he had protected me from because he was not sure I could handle them, that he had made mistakes trying to carry those burdens alone, and that he hoped the congregation would pray for both of them, both of us, like we were equally burdened, like there were 2 people struggling here, not one person performing and one person being publicly diagnosed. He sat down. He did not look at me again. The room did what rooms do in those moments. It went quiet in the specific way that means everyone heard something, no one knows what to say, and several people are already deciding what version of this story they will tell by Tuesday. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do before. It closed. I walked out during the closing hymn, not running, not crying. I picked up my purse from the pew, nodded to the woman sitting beside me, and walked down the side aisle and through the side door and out into the parking lot, where the April air was still cool enough that I could feel it on my arms through my blazer. I stood next to my car, and I did not move for a while. Here's something about being a school counselor for 11 years. You learn to slow down the moment right after something happens and ask yourself what you actually saw, not what you feel about it. Teenagers will tell you they are fine and then show you with every single thing they do that they are not fine. Adults do the same thing in reverse. They tell you something is terrible, and the behavior underneath it tells a completely different story. I ran what I had just watched through that same lens. Darius had not broken down. He had not stumbled over words or lost composure or seemed surprised by his own feelings. He had spoken in the measured, practiced tone he used for city council presentations. He had stayed on message. He had made eye contact with specific people in the room. The councilman, the deacon board, my mother, at specific moments. This was not a man processing pain in public. This was a man delivering a statement to an audience he had selected. I thought about the printed program insert. I thought about the man in the back pew I did not recognize. I thought about the fact that Darius had planned this entire morning himself, which he had never done for anything related to our marriage in 7 years. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Greater Restoration Baptist, and I made myself think clearly instead of feeling. The question was not what he had just done to me. The question was what he needed the room to remember. I need to go back, because none of this makes sense without the before. I met Darius Holcomb in the fall of 2016 at a community leadership symposium hosted by the Atlanta Urban League. I was 31. He was 34. I had been a school counselor at a Title I middle school in Clayton County for 6 years, and I was presenting a panel on student mental health resources. He was in the audience, which I remember thinking was unusual because most of the business people at those events networked through the cocktail hour and ignored the panels entirely. He asked a question during the Q&A that was actually a good question, which I also remember because it almost never happened. Afterward, he introduced himself. Commercial real estate development, he said, mostly mixed-use projects in underserved communities. He said he thought the school mental health work I was describing was the missing piece in most neighborhood revitalization plans, that you could build beautiful buildings all day and the community would still struggle if the kids inside the schools were struggling. I did not believe him entirely. Developers say what they need to say, but I engaged with it because the argument was at least coherent. We talked for an hour and a half. He got my number. He called the next day, which I thought was confident bordering on too much. But he called to ask if I wanted to look at a community center site he was working on, not for a date, just to get my professional read on the youth programming space. That was clever. That was probably the most effective thing he ever did. Within 4 months, we were together. Within 2 years, we were married. Small wedding. My Uncle Calvin walking me down the aisle because my father passed when I was 19. Darius's family warm and welcoming. My mother already halfway in love with him because he pulled out chairs and called her Miss Estelle and always brought something when he came to her house. The first 3 years were good. I genuinely believe that now, even after everything. Not perfect. Darius worked long hours and could be remote when his mind was on a project, but real. We argued like real people. We made up like real people. We built a life in a brick house in East Point with a backyard and a fig tree and neighbors whose kids I sometimes ran into at work. Then the business started growing faster. Bigger developments, investors I did not know. Partners whose names I learned and then forgot because they changed. Business trips that used to be one night became 4, 5 a week. He started asking me to sign things. Not often, maybe 6 or 7 times over 2 years, and always when I was in the middle of something else. Quick explanation. Investment vehicle, standard LLC paperwork, property in my name for tax structuring. He had already reviewed everything. It was just a formality. I signed. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. He had given me no reason not to, and he knew that. He knew it, and he used it, and he built 3 years of crimes on the foundation of it. He did not come home that Sunday. No call, no text. His phone went straight to voicemail twice and then stopped accepting calls, which meant he had turned it off deliberately. I walked through the house slowly after dark. I did not turn on every light like I usually did. I went room to room in the partial dark and tried to figure out what I was looking at. We had lived in this house for 4 years. Nice house. Darius had put it in my name when we bought it, which he said was for estate planning purposes, which I had accepted at the time as reasonable. I was beginning to reconsider a lot of things I had accepted as reasonable. I went to the kitchen and sat at the table, and I opened a piece of mail I had left in the drawer 3 weeks earlier. I had set it aside, meaning to ask Darius about it, and then forgotten in the regular motion of daily life. It was a legal notice from the Georgia Secretary of State's office. It was addressed to a company called Holston Bridge Consulting, LLC. The registered agent on file was a Camille Greer Holcomb, which is me. I had never heard of Holston Bridge Consulting. I had never registered a company. I had never asked to be anyone's registered agent for anything. I sat with that piece of paper for a long time. Then I went to the small drawer in Darius's home office, the one I had never had reason to go through, and I started reading. Renata Sims has been my closest friend since we were both 24 and living in the same apartment complex off Flat Shoals. She is a paralegal, has been for 15 years at a mid-sized civil litigation firm in Midtown. She is not an attorney, but she understands how legal documents work, and more importantly, she understands how they get misused. I called her at 11:45 that Sunday night. She answered on the second ring. "You okay?" she said. "I need you to come over." She did not ask questions. She showed up 40 minutes later with a jacket over her pajamas and a container of leftover pasta from her refrigerator that she set on my counter without explanation. I showed her the mail piece. I showed her 3 other documents I'd found in Darius's desk drawer. 2 operating agreements for companies I had never heard of, and a property deed for a lot in Fulton County listed in my name alone. Renata read everything slowly. She asked me to get her a pen and a notepad, which I did, and she started making notes. When she finally looked up, she did not look worried. She looked focused, which is a different thing. "Camille," she said, "how many times has Darius asked you to sign something over the past 3 years?" I thought about it. 6 times, maybe 7. "And you read them?" He explained them. I didn't read every page. She wrote something on the notepad. "Did you keep any copies?" "No." She set the pen down. She looked at me in the way she has where she is choosing what to say next very carefully. "This is not a paperwork mistake," she said. "Someone set you up as the face of a company you did not know existed. That does not happen accidentally. That is a decision someone made." I already knew that, but hearing her say it changed the temperature in the room. "Okay," I said. "Okay," she said back. "So here's what we're going to do." Tap, tap. I spent 3 days going through everything. Darius's home office, the basement storage, the shared cloud drive we both had access to for household documents, the financial accounts I could reach online. I photographed everything with my phone. Every page, every statement, every document I found with my name on it in any form. I created a folder in my phone's camera roll and labeled it with a name that meant nothing. I called it Renovation Quotes in case he picked up my phone. What I found, piece by piece, was this: 3 limited liability companies registered in Georgia with me as registered agent. 1 in Nevada. Property deeds in my name for 4 parcels of land in Fulton, DeKalb, and Cobb counties, none of which I had ever visited or knowingly purchased. Bank statements for a checking account I had never opened, tied to my Social Security number with 18 months of transaction history, and signatures. Document after document with my signature on them, the specific slant of my capital letters, the way I loop my G, exact, down to things that people who are not me would not notice to replicate. I sat in the basement surrounded by paper, and I looked at my own name written in a way I did not write it, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not heartbreak. Something colder. I had been so careful not to be that kind of person. The kind who looks through her husband's phone. The kind who questions every business trip. The kind who demands to see the books. I had been so careful to be the wife who trusted, and someone had studied that quality in me like a resource and extracted everything they could from it. I brought everything upstairs. I photographed the last of it. Then I called Renata. I need a forensic accountant, I said. Already made some calls, she said. My mother called Monday morning. I let it go to voicemail. She called again Monday afternoon. I answered. She was careful. My mother has a gift for delivering information in a way that sounds like concern when it is actually a request. Baby, she said, I just want to make sure you're all right, because Wanda got a call from Sister Patterson, who spoke with Deacon Thomas, and people are... Mom, I said, I'm fine. You left during the closing hymn. I needed some air. A pause. Sister Patterson said Darius stopped by the church office this morning. She said he seemed very troubled. He had gone to the church office, the morning after, to continue the performance in front of someone who would make sure the story spread. Mom, I said, I need you to trust me for a little while. I know that's a hard thing to ask, but I need you to not respond to anything you're hearing about us right now. Not to confirm it, not to deny it, not to explain it. Just not yet. Another pause, longer. Are you safe? She said. Yes. Are you in the house? Not right now. She breathed. Okay, I trust you, but Camille, you call me. 3 of my mother's prayer group friends called that week. 2 women from the anniversary program texted to check in, which meant they were checking in on something specific they had heard. One of Darius's cousins, a woman who had always been pleasant to me at family gatherings, sent a message that said she was praying for both of them and hoped I would reach out if I needed anything. Darius had gotten to the church, which meant he had gotten to my mother's world, which meant the story he was telling had started before the anniversary program. He had been laying groundwork. I felt the weight of it. I'm not going to pretend I did not. This was my community. These were people who had watched me grow up, who knew my grandmother's name, who would show up if I called, and he had seeded doubt in them before I even knew I was fighting. I kept my phone charged and my voice steady, and I said nothing. Tia. On the Wednesday after the anniversary, I moved what mattered. I did not pack everything. I did not want him to know I was leaving until after I had done what needed to be done. So I took what was mine: financial records, personal documents, the external hard drive from Darius's office that I found in the bottom desk drawer, my grandmother's jewelry, my laptop, 3 boxes of files from my home office, 2 suitcases of clothes. I took it all to my cousin Lorraine's house in Decatur, where she had a spare room and the sense not to ask too many questions until I was ready to answer them. Renata drove. We made 2 trips. We were done by noon. Then I went to a bank I had never used before and opened a checking account in my name only. Transferred what I was legally entitled to from our joint account. Half, exactly half, documented, and left the rest. Then I called a locksmith to change the locks on the East Point house and notified Darius by text that I had done so and that his attorney should contact Renata for any communication going forward. His response came within 20 minutes. We need to talk. This is not what it looks like, which is what people say when it is exactly what it looks like. I showed Renata the text. She made a note of it, time-stamped. Then she took my phone and drafted a single response from me. All communication through counsel, thank you. Then she handed the phone back. "That's the last time you talked to him directly," she said. I nodded. I already knew that. Her. Renata had a contact, a man named Bryant, who did public records research for a law firm she used to work at. He pulled everything he could find on the companies I had located in the documents. Most of them were shells with no public footprint. But one of them, a company called Beacon South Acquisitions, had a real paper trail, active business license, a registered office address in Buckhead, a website, sparse but professional, listing Darius Holcomb as principal. Renata and I spent 2 weeks working that angle. We pulled property records tied to Beacon South. We traced transactions. We mapped connections between Beacon South and other entities Darius had been linked to publicly. It looked like the center of the operation. It looked like the answer. When Marcus Greer finally sat down with everything we had, he told us in the first 20 minutes that Beacon South was a door. Marcus was a forensic accountant Renata had located through a referral, a quiet man in his late 50s who had spent 12 years at the IRS before going private, and who looked at financial documents the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray. He charged a flat rate for a preliminary review and did not make small talk. He told us Beacon South was the most visible layer of something with 3 layers beneath it. Money did not originate with Beacon South. Money passed through Beacon South on its way to somewhere else. The actual structure, the companies where funds were being laundered, the accounts where they landed, routed through entities registered under my name and social security number that did not appear in anything we had found yet. We had spent 2 weeks mapping the lobby. "How long will it take to find the rest?" Renata asked. "Give me the original documents," Marcus said. "All of them. The property deeds, the account statements, the operating agreements. Give me 10 days. We gave him everything. I will not pretend those 10 days were fine. I was sleeping in Lorraine's guest room on a mattress that was slightly too soft. I was going to work every day and sitting across from teenagers who were in real pain and doing my job because it was the one thing in my life that still made complete sense. I was eating badly, I was not sleeping enough, and I was carrying the knowledge that somewhere, on documents I had never seen, my name was attached to crimes I had not committed. But I waited, because Marcus Greer had the real map, and I needed to know what it said. Marcus called us in on a Saturday morning. He had printed everything. He laid it out across a folding table he set up in his home office in a color-coded system that looked like something you would see in a federal investigation, which, it turned out, was the point. He walked us through it methodically. 3 years of documented activity, 4 shell companies registered in my name, 11 properties purchased at prices significantly above market value, using funds that originated from accounts Marcus described as of unclear legitimate origin, which is careful language for money that came from somewhere it should not have. The money flowed in, passed through property transactions on paper, and moved out into accounts Marcus had tracked to 2 offshore locations. My name was on the formation documents for every company. My signature was on the purchase agreements for every property. My social security number tied to accounts I had never accessed. If anyone looked at this without the context of how it had been done, the story it told was simple. A woman named Camille Greer Holcomb had built a money laundering operation using her real estate connections, and her husband had no idea, which was, Marcus confirmed, the point. He needed a name, Marcus said. He was looking at his documents, not at me, which I appreciated. He needed a real person with a real social security number and a real signature. Investigations into these structures always end up at the registered agent, the named owner. If your name is on everything, you are the answer investigators find first. He gets to be the husband who was deceived. I sat with that for a moment. The anniversary program, I said. Renata looked at me. He needed people to already be questioning me, I said, before the investigation started. So when my name came up, there was already a story in place. Marcus nodded slowly. That would be consistent. I looked at the table covered in paper. My name, dozens of times over, on documents that described a criminal enterprise. Okay, I said. What do we do with this? Sorry. That night, I drove to Lorraine's house and I sat in the guest room and I worked through the full logic of it. Not the emotion, the logic. Darius had needed several things to execute this plan. He had needed my signature on documents, which he obtained through years of careful, low-pressure requests at moments when I was distracted. He had needed my social security number and personal information, which I had given him openly because we were married, and I had no reason not to. He had needed me to be uninvolved enough in the finances that I would not notice the accounts or the companies. He had trained me for that. He had praised my trust, called me low maintenance, made me feel that asking questions about his business was a form of disrespect. And then, when he was ready to exit, he needed one more thing. He needed the people who knew me to already be uncertain about me. Because once an investigation started and my name showed up on everything, he needed to be able to say, look at her, look at how she behaved, look at what happened at the church, how she left, how erratic she was, how secretive. Does that sound like a woman who had nothing to hide? Greater Restoration Baptist was not just our church. It was a jury pool. It was my mother's world. It was the place where my character had been built and witnessed and vouched for since I was a child. And he had stood up in the middle of it and quietly, precisely, without ever making a direct accusation, planted the seed of doubt he needed. He had done it months before he needed to use it. That level of planning is a particular kind of cold. I did not cry that night. I want to be honest about that. I thought I might, and then I did not. What I felt instead was something like clarity settling in where hurt would normally live. Not peace, not okay, just, I see it now. I see all of it, and seeing it means I can move. 3 weeks after the anniversary, I got a text from a number I did not recognize. Hi, Camille. This is Phyllis Graham. I worked with Darius at Holcomb Development for 4 years. I've been thinking about you. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I showed Renata. She told me to look her up before I responded. Phyllis Graham was real. She was the office manager at Holcomb Development Group, which was the public-facing company Darius operated under. Professional LinkedIn profile. No obvious connection to anything we had found. I told Renata I wanted to meet her. We chose a Panera on Buford Highway, far enough from both our usual areas that running into anyone was unlikely. I arrived first. Phyllis walked in 10 minutes later, a woman in her early 50s, natural hair, sensible shoes, a tote bag that looked like it had been packed for business rather than lunch. She sat down. She ordered a coffee. She looked at her hands for a moment before she looked at me. I want to say first, she said, that I am here on my own. Nobody sent me. Nobody knows I'm here. Okay, I said. I have a daughter, she said. She's 23. I kept thinking, if this were her. If this were happening to her and somebody knew something and said nothing. She stopped, started again. I noticed things at the office over the past 2 years, patterns in the paperwork that did not add up, routing of funds through accounts that were separate from the main business operations, properties being purchased and sold quickly with no visible development activity. She reached into the tote bag and removed a manila folder. I am not an accountant, she said. I don't fully understand what I was seeing, but I kept copies. I didn't know what to do with them. I was afraid. She slid the folder across the table. I'm still afraid, but I think you need these more than I need to feel safe. I opened the folder. Internal calendar records, expense routing notes, an email chain, printed, between Darius and a name I recognized from Marcus's documents. An outside contact, a man in commercial real estate whose business address was in Savannah. Phyllis, I said. Please don't put my name anywhere public yet, she said quickly. I have a job. I have health insurance. I understand, I said. I'm not going to do anything that hurts you. I promise. She nodded. She looked slightly less like she was about to leave. We sat there for another 45 minutes. She told me what she had seen. I listened without interrupting. When she was done, I told her I was working with a forensic accountant and was planning to take what I had found to federal authorities. She said, "Good." Then she picked up her bag, said she would be in touch, and left. I sat with the folder for a while before I went back to my car. Chi. I want to be honest about what this part felt like, because I think people hear she built a case, and they picture something cinematic. A woman at a desk with string on a corkboard, everything clicking into place. The reality was more like this. I was in Lorraine's guest room at 11 at night with my laptop and a box of files, cross-referencing account numbers against property deeds while eating crackers because I had forgotten to eat dinner. Again. My eyes hurt. My back hurt. I kept losing track of which spreadsheet I had saved where. But here is what I had by the end of those weeks. Bank statements for every account I could access, showing the money movement Marcus had mapped. Property deeds with forged signatures, each of them cross-referenced with the date and, where I could remember it, the general circumstances under which Darius had asked me to sign something around that time. Phyllis's calendar records showing meetings between Darius and his outside contact. The email chain she had printed. Marcus's full financial analysis, professionally formatted. A personal statement I had written, in plain language, documenting every time I had been asked to sign something, what I had been told it was, and what I now understood it to actually be. I made 4 copies of everything. One set at Renata's office in a locked file drawer. One set at my Uncle Calvin's house in Marietta, inside a sealed box I handed to him on his porch without going in, because he looked at my face and understood that I needed him to hold something without asking why. One encrypted cloud backup, and one set in my possession. Calvin is my father's younger brother. He pulled me into a hug when I handed him the box and said, "Whatever you need, I'm here." I held on to that. In the nights when I was tired and scared and questioning whether I was doing this right, I held on to the fact that Calvin had a sealed box in his hall closet and would guard it with everything he had. This part I still think about. Before I moved out of the East Point house, I had taken a small external hard drive from the bottom drawer of Darius's desk. I had not yet examined it fully when I moved it to Lorraine's. I put it in a shoebox on the shelf in the guest room closet, along with some other documents I had not gotten to yet. 6 weeks after the anniversary, I went to get the hard drive to give to Marcus. It was not in the shoebox. I took everything off the shelf, checked every box in the closet, went through the guest room twice, called Lorraine in from the other room and asked if she had moved anything. She had not. She had not been in that closet. The hard drive was gone. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, and I thought very carefully about whether I was losing my mind or whether something had happened. Lorraine's house was not locked during the day. She worked from home. She was in and out of the backyard. She did not always set the alarm when she ran to the store. I did not know if Darius had sent someone. I did not know if it had been taken accidentally with something else. I did not know if I had put it somewhere I could not remember. That uncertainty was the worst part. Because I could not prove anything had been taken, I could not even be sure something had been taken, and the not knowing sat in me like a stone. I called Renata. She was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "What was on it?" "I don't know. I never opened it." "Then we don't know what we lost." She paused. "Can Marcus rebuild that piece from other sources?" "I don't know. I have to ask him." Marcus said he could try. It took him 8 more days. He used bank records, the email chain from Phyllis, and property transaction records available through the county to reconstruct the financial thread the hard drive might have supported. We lost some granularity. We did not lose the core. But I moved everything else to Renata's office that same afternoon, and I changed my behavior after that. I assumed, from that point forward, that Darius knew more than I thought he knew about where I was and what I was doing. I moved faster. Renata arranged a meeting with a woman named Vivian Okafor, a former federal prosecutor who had gone into private practice 6 years ago, handling white-collar criminal defense. She had agreed to meet with us as a courtesy to Renata's firm. No charge for the consultation. No commitment beyond listening. She met us at Renata's office on a Thursday evening after regular business hours. She was in her mid-50s, tall, and had the particular stillness of someone who has sat in a lot of difficult rooms and learned not to show what she was thinking until she was ready. She read everything. She took 2 hours. She had questions, mostly technical, about specific transactions, about exact dates, about how certain documents had come into my possession. When she was done, she set her reading glasses on the table and looked at me. "I have no doubt that this is federal," she said. "Money laundering, identity theft, wire fraud, possibly RICO depending on the scope of the outside partner's involvement. If you take this to the FBI, they will open a case. I am certain of that." She folded her hands. "What I want you to understand before you make that decision is what you are starting. Once federal investigators open a file, it moves on its own timeline. You do not control the speed. You do not control what becomes public. Your name will be in documents. The media may pick it up. People in your community will know." She paused. "And Darius will know immediately that the information came from you. He may respond legally, financially, or through his associates. I want to name that risk plainly." I thought about Phyllis saying she was afraid. I thought about the hard drive I could not find. I thought about my mother and what she was going to have to hear, and how she was going to hear it if this went public. "Can you protect my mother from the media piece?" I asked. Vivian was honest. "I can try to limit what spreads. I cannot stop it entirely. She may hear things before you can prepare her." I looked at Renata. Renata looked at me. "Okay," I said to Vivian. "Here is my next question. What happens if I wait?" Vivian's expression did not change. "If there is already an investigation underway that we don't know about, and given the scope of what you've shown me, that is possible. Waiting means you are still the person they find first. Your name is on everything. Waiting does not reduce that risk. It only reduces the time you have to establish that you are a victim and not a participant." I nodded slowly. "Then we go," I said. "Then—" FBI Atlanta. The field office on Century Parkway is not dramatic from the outside. It is a glass office building that could be anything. An insurance company, a consulting firm. I have driven past it 100 times and never looked at it twice. I walked in with a rolling carry-on bag and Vivian at my side. Renata waited in the parking lot because only I was authorized for the meeting. Special Agent Denise Quarles met us in a conference room on the 4th floor. She was in her early 50s, dark, natural hair cut close, the kind of suit that said, "I am here to work, not to impress." She shook my hand. She shook Vivian's. She sat down and opened a legal pad. "Mrs. Holcomb," she said. "Ms. Greer Holcomb," I said. "I've started using both." She nodded and wrote it down. "Tell me what happened. Start wherever you think I need to start." I started with the church, because that is where I started understanding. I told her everything in the order I had understood it: the program, the parking lot, the piece of mail, the documents, Marcus's analysis, Phyllis and her folder, the missing hard drive. I did not embellish. I did not soften. I answered every question she asked, including the ones that were uncomfortable, including when she asked me why I had signed documents without reading them fully. Because he told me what they were, I said, and I trusted him. And he had spent 3 years making sure I was the kind of wife who trusted him. She looked at me for a moment. Then she wrote something down. I opened the carry-on and began laying out the documents in the organized stacks I had prepared. Bank statements, property deeds, Marcus's analysis, Phyllis's records, my personal statement, the email chain. Agent Quarles reviewed everything methodically. She asked for clarification on specific transactions. She examined the signatures on the forged documents alongside a copy of my actual signature from my driver's license and asked me to write my name on a fresh sheet of paper, which I did, and she studied the comparison without expression. 2 hours in, she set down the document she was holding and looked at me directly. "This is substantial," she said. "Multiple federal charges depending on what we develop in investigation. Identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, potentially conspiracy." She paused. "I have to ask you something, and I need you to understand it is standard procedure. Why are you bringing this to us now, rather than when these activities began?" "Because I did not know they had begun," I said. "I found out the same week I am sitting here." I walked her through the timeline of my discovery. Every step. She listened. She asked follow-up questions. I answered them. At the end, she asked one more question. "Do you know your husband's current schedule? Any meetings or activity we should know about?" I thought about Phyllis, about the shared company calendar she still had access to. "I can find out," I said. Agent Quarles nodded once. "Then let's talk about next steps," she said. "Ain't ants." I was at Lorraine's kitchen table at 6:47 in the morning eating cereal when Renata called. "It's done," she said. I set my spoon down. "Darius," I said. "Him and the outside contact both. Buckhead property, like the calendar showed. They had a third person there too, someone I don't know yet." I looked at my cereal bowl. I looked at the window. The light was gray and early. "Okay," I said. "Okay," Renata said. "I need to call my mother before she sees it on the news." There was a pause on Renata's end. "You want me to stay on hold while you do that?" "Yes," I said. "Please." I clicked over and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring because she has always been an early riser. I heard the sound of her kitchen, the particular creak of her cabinet when she opens it for the coffee mugs. "Mom," I said, "I need to tell you something before you turn on the news." She was quiet. Then, "Is it Darius?" "Yes." Another pause. "Tell me." I told her as plainly as I could. Not all of it. There was not time for all of it, and I wanted to be there in person for all of it. But enough. The fraud, my name on the documents, the plan he had built, what I had done about it. My mother was quiet for a long time after I stopped talking. "The church program," she said finally. "He needed people to think." "Yes," I said. "He did." She made a sound I had never heard from her. Not crying exactly. Something older than that. "Baby," she said. "I'm so sorry." "Mom, you didn't know." "I should have. None of us should have had to know," I said. "That's the point. He made sure of that." We stayed on the phone together for a while, not talking much. Sometimes that is what people need, just to know someone is there while they sit with something hard. The arrest made the local news by 9 that morning. By the afternoon, it had moved to regional coverage. A prominent Atlanta developer, federal charges, multiple counts. Darius's name was in the headline. His photograph, the professional headshot from the Holcomb Development website, the one where he looked trustworthy and accomplished, was everywhere. By Sunday, the church knew. I did not go that week. I was not ready to sit in those pews and feel all those eyes. I sent Pastor Mitchell a brief message, respectful, nonspecific, letting him know I was okay and would be in touch. My mother went. She called me that evening. The pastor prayed for you both by name, she said, just for peace and for truth to come to light. He didn't make it about anything. That's good, I said. Some of Darius's people weren't there. A few. She paused. Sister Patterson came up to me after service and apologized. For what? I said. For calling me after the anniversary. She said she should have known something was wrong with what he did, that she had let herself get swept up in the drama of it, instead of thinking clearly. I thought about that, about how much careful maneuvering it takes to make 300 people collectively misread one moment. That it had worked as well as it did was not a testament to anyone's foolishness. It was a testament to how precisely Darius had understood the room. Tell Sister Patterson it's fine, I said. I already told her, my mother said. I said we're all still figuring it out. That was honest. That was the right thing to say. One of the deacons who had sat near Darius during the anniversary program called me that week. He said he had known something felt off when Darius stood up. He had not known what to do. He was sorry. I know, I said. It's okay. I understand. I did not tell him it was fine. I just told him I understood. Those are different things. The investigation took everything it said it would take, and then a little more. Depositions, multiple. Hours sitting across from Darius's defense attorneys, who tried every angle they had. They suggested I had known about the fraud. They suggested I had participated and gotten scared. They suggested my current cooperation with federal investigators was self-serving, which, yes, it also protected me. I was never going to claim otherwise. They suggested my account of how I had discovered the documents was implausible, too convenient, too perfectly timed. I answered every question. I stayed level. I had been a school counselor long enough to know that someone raising their voice to shake you loose is still just a person in a room. I let them make their arguments. I told the truth. There were court appearances. Darius and I were never in the same room for long, but long enough. He looked at me once, across a table and several attorneys. His expression was the one I remembered from the church program. Careful, controlled, performing something for an audience. I gave him nothing back. I looked at him the way you look at a fact. You register it, and you move on. Vivian stayed with me through most of it. Renata came to every deposition. My uncle Calvin drove down from Marietta for the first major hearing and sat in the gallery and nodded at me when I walked in, which was worth more than I can explain. Phyllis cooperated with investigators, and her name came up in depositions, which she had agreed to. She did not lose her job. Holcomb Development was effectively dissolved once the charges became public, but she had already found something else by then. She texted me when it was done. Glad it's over. Hope you're doing okay. I saved that text. Darius pleaded guilty on 7 of 12 federal counts, the 7 that were cleanest, that the evidence covered most completely. His outside partner went to trial and received the full weight of it. Sentencing was scheduled for the following spring. The day the plea was entered, I drove to my mother's house and sat at her kitchen table, and she made me a cup of tea, and we did not talk about it directly for a while. We talked about her garden. She was growing tomatoes this year. She asked if I had enough room for a plant at my new place, and I said I would check. Eventually she said, "Are you doing all right? Honestly?" "Honestly?" I said. "Yes. Not great, but yes." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. That was all. That was enough. 3 months later, I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment in Decatur that is smaller than our guest room used to be, and I do not miss the big house at all. I go to work. I sit across from 12 and 13-year-olds who are trying to figure out how to trust their own judgment after something went wrong. Sometimes I think about what I would say to a younger version of myself. The one at the community leadership conference, the one being carefully listened to by a man who understood that genuine attention is the most effective thing you can offer someone who has spent years feeling invisible. I do not think I would say, Watch out for men who listen too well. That is not the lesson. The lesson is more complicated than that. It is something about the difference between trusting someone and erasing your own judgment in the service of trust. Those are not the same. I confused them for 7 years, and I'm still working out what that means about me, about what I wanted, about what I was trying to be in that marriage. That is the kind of honest I could not have been a year ago. Renata and I have lunch most weeks. We argue about things that do not matter, which is the best kind of argument. She has started making noises about going to law school, which I tell her she has been saying for 15 years, and maybe she should just do it. She tells me to mind my business. My mother and I talk every Sunday. The relationship feels different now, more honest in the places where it used to be careful. I think we were both performing something for years, me being the daughter who had made it, her being the mother whose daughter had made it. That particular performance ended the morning I called her from Lorraine's kitchen. What came after it feels more like us. I got a card at Christmas from Phyllis Graham. She had moved into an operations role at a nonprofit. She said she was happy. She said she was glad she made the call. The card is on my refrigerator because I wanted to look at it every morning. Darius's sentencing is in 6 weeks. I have not decided yet whether I will attend. Vivian says I do not have to. Renata says I should go, that I should see it close. My mother says I should do what I need to do and not worry about what it looks like. I think my mother is right, as she usually is. I am not healed. I want to be clear about that. I do not believe in stories that resolve into being fully okay, because I have sat with enough people in enough pain to know that healing is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice. Some days I do it well. Some days I eat cereal for dinner and watch something mindless and let myself just be tired. But I know what I did with what I had. I had a sealed manila envelope of documents, and a forensic accountant, and a paralegal who came over in her pajamas, and a woman I barely knew who brought me a folder across a restaurant table because she had a daughter and she knew what was right. I had my own name, which someone had tried to corrupt, and I took it back. That turns out to be enough. It turns out to be exactly enough. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.